All right, so thank you everybody for coming. My name is Mike Zappelin. I go by Zappy. Feel free to call me that. There's so many Mikes out there that at this point I'm just going with Zappy, especially at the Milken conference. You don't want to be confused over which Mike it is. So that's where I'm headed. My company is called Zappy Incorporated, and it is a diversified development stage cannabis company. And this is a really exciting moment. I don't think there's ever even been a moment. I've been coming to Milken Global for 10 years, and I don't think there's ever been a moment where an industry began, where there was an industry. Here in this case, we're talking about a $50 to $100 billion industry that's just starting. There's no brand leaders. There's no, de facto large companies that are in the space. And we believe that this is the moment for this industry where we're calling it Cannabis 2.0, where this is what Todd's described before as the end of the beginning of the cannabis economy, which is already a massive multi-billion-dollar industry, is has been pirates and outlaws and people willing to break the law to have their mom or pop business in this marijuana space. And this is now the point where the business people, the scientists, the doctors, the professionals are coming into this space, and we've never seen anything like it. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself. I was lucky enough to get my first job out of college, 1988. Drexel Burnham came around. They were at the top of the game at the time, and I got myself into a training program. I was picked as one of the kids who was going to be in this training program for a year and a half, go through all the departments at Drexel and be sort of a liaison to the trading or to all the different departments at Drexel. So in that experience, I saw the incredible things that were happening. And what we were doing at Drexel, it was mind-blowing on a day-to-day basis. And for my company, my Zappy Incorporated, I've always tried to follow this message that Mike always gave back in those days, where there was, obviously tons of money happening, people making incredible sums of money, and people used to ask, why do you guys want to make so much money? Why would somebody want to make $500 million in a year? And Mike would always say to us, what we're doing is we're creating value. And when you create value, wealth is just a byproduct of that. So what I'm trying to do with my company, I know some of the folks here on this panel, we're trying to create value in this space so that we can be one of the brands as this materializes into a mature industry. And, the fact that there's something that might be already tens of billions of dollars of real industry here, and the demand is there from the consumers, we have an opportunity right in this moment, everybody here in this room, where we can all participate in this industry similar to industries like, the automobile or oil. But in this moment, what's really incredible, it seems like everybody's jumping into the fray and coming into the space, but really, because of the taboo nature, because it's not completely legal industry yet, some people have never had any experience or touched the product, it's really not that everybody's coming in. There's a tremendous opportunity here for anybody to come in. So in addition to that, I figured I would just, I've been a supporter of the Milken Global Conference because I believe that this is where the ideas really bloom. And for the last few years, I don't know if you show slide, I'm going to show a video, but I wanted to show just a slide 13 and 14. Mike has let me participate in his baseball trip every summer where we go fly and do two baseball games in a day for Prostate Cancer Foundation, and we jet around and we're the the cheerleaders for Mike and Tommy Lasorda to promote their tie-in with Major League Baseball, and it's an incredible thing. If you go to the next slide, 13, anything can happen. Here we are in the field with Chief Justice Roberts, and it's just a really crazy situation. But as you're out there talking and you're out and about, the idea exchange that happens is incredible. And I want to show, before I show this video, I just want to set this up for, we're in this moment right now where we don't need to argue about whether this should be legal or not legal or how it happens. What we need to do is take a responsible approach and say, okay, here's this powerful energy, natural energy, and it's coming out. And quite frankly, as Craig would say, if we didn't know anything about cannabis and somebody went down to the rainforest and just brought it back, they would literally win the Nobel Prize for that because of the medical applications, because of the societal effect. And I think we have a responsibility right now, because of all that healing effect that's in there and all the opportunities for society, to do this right. And what I don't want to see is when the internet came along and the record companies felt very threatened. They wanted to try to litigate it and, put people out of business and regulate it. And obviously it didn't work. Had they embraced it and brought it out as part of what they were doing, they would have a much stronger business right now, and they would be that much more in tune with everybody. So the idea is to not make that mistake here with this. At the same time, it is a powerful energy. So just like an automobile, you don't just, when your kid turns 16 years old, hand them the keys and say, okay, you're 16, go, drive the car. These kids, obviously you have to be trained, you have to have the right experience to handle this properly. And so I think if we look at it as not only something that is already being reported to have applications for diabetes, for epilepsy, for all kinds of incredible cures, we have an opportunity whereby we can bring this out responsibly together as a group, and the opportunities are here for all of us. And they exist in these plants. So I just want to make sure that's not my phone, but I want to show you a 2-minute video of a movie called The Reality of Truth that I'm doing with Deepak Chopra and Peter Jansen, who's here someplace. And the film is called The Reality of Truth, and it looks at natural ancient wisdom, things like meditation, shamanism, and natural plants, and the way that we might be able to use these things for the betterment of society. And so I'd like to just show you 2 minutes here. That would be slide 12, the video.
What we call today everyday reality, which we take for normal, okay? Mm-hmm. There's war, there's terrorism, there's global warming, there's social injustice. 50% of the world lives on less than $2 a day. The environment is totally screwed up. And we say this is normal. Yeah. It's psychotic, mm-hmm. right? And it's psychotic because we have created it. I personally feel that we've lost a lot. We need to break the wiring here. So what we're saying is a little controversial. Many neurologists or neuroscientists think that the mind is created by your brain. It's not true. The mind is an instrument that traps a relational process that's going on in the universe.
You've said before that your first experience with spirituality was when you were 17, you took LSD.
What is enlightenment but being one with the source? I wouldn't call them hallucinations. They help people break out of the everyday hallucination of separation and to the reality of truth. And whether they did it through wine or mana or soma, who cares? The fact is, they brought people into a reality which is much more real than the reality that causes war and terrorism and eco-destruction and social injustice and radical poverty, which are all projections of the separate mind. So while there's a lot of arrogance in science, the fact is, everything is a miracle. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. Life is a total miracle. If you get it, everything is a miracle because we haven't the foggiest idea about the things I mentioned and many more.
What do you think it would take to break through that boundary at this point? I mean, here we are in this 21st century.
Let's have a party.
We'll bring everybody down to Peru and enlighten them.
Yeah, and put some in the pot and let's drink it.
Amen.
Amen.
So the reason I wanted to show this, thank you. The reason I wanted to show this is, I'm positioning myself as an advocate for these natural occurring energies that are out there, and they have very profound effects for all of the ailments facing society today. And so in putting this panel together, I'm really excited because we really do have, from a business standpoint and a societal standpoint, incredible panel here. We've got Todd Denkin, who is the CEO at DigiPath. Todd is in the laboratory testing and standardization business, which is going to be critical for this industry because most people don't know when they get some product what they're really getting, and that type of food labeling is coming to this industry really soon. So Todd's here for that. Craig Ellens is the CEO of GrowLife Science, and GrowLife Science is on the cutting edge of technology in the area of growing, because to grow for the medical use or for consumer use, how you grow it and how it's touched and processed is critical. Sue Rusche is here. She's from a concerned citizen group that wants to see this brought out properly, or I'll let her speak to that at some point. We've got Michael Kraft, who is from Canada. He represents a company called Weed MD. They are pre-licensed in Canada and they're setting up a grow operation in the old Imperial Tobacco building, where a lot of people lost jobs at one point, and this is bringing jobs back to the economy there. He's also going to talk about the opportunity in Canada, which represents export to the entire rest of the world that maybe doesn't exist here as an opportunity. And last, Doug Praw from Goodwin Procter, who is going to let us know about some of the legal goings on and the things that, as an investor, or whatever your business angle here is, that you understand how you're protected or not protected. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to toss over to Craig, who is, again, the technology of growing. And if we can run video number 54, I think this will probably blow people's minds how advanced this is now becoming as we head into the Cannabis 2.0 that almost pretty much starts with this panel here today.
The Grow Blocks was specifically designed and engineered to produce the optimal environmental growing conditions for medical cannabis cultivation. It is the first chamber of its kind with the ability to monitor and control the growth process required to produce consistent, high-grade medicinal marijuana products. Each Grow Blocks chamber is fully enclosed, containing an individual plant. Isolating the plants protects them from the harmful environmental conditions that may contaminate the medical-grade plants growing inside. Infestations such as insects and mites, harmful contaminants like pesticides and herbicides can easily compromise the consistency and efficacy of the end product.
So that's just a sort of a sample, but I think that was a little short. There's a pretty incredible technology in there.
Can we run some more of the video?
I don't think so, but I want Craig to talk about, we're talking about safety here because, again, this is happening, so we need to deal with that fact. So, Craig, from a point of safety in the medical and the growing side, what's the situation currently?
I'm 62 years old, and I have been a self-medicating cannabis user for quite a while. And I learned during the process that there are lots of chemicals and lots of things that go into the growing, similar to our lettuce. Lettuce has 50 different poisons in it by the time it gets delivered to your plate. So as the industry started growing up, coming from a public company background, trying to think about how do we make an institutional, a company that is institutionally financed, because the government is not doing the work necessary to finance the kind of research that is required. It's up to private industry, and these irrational public bubbles that are out there today have created some capital and some opportunity for people that want to take the next step in it. So standardization and regulation is what the industry needs. It will either get there by some governmental agency forcing that to happen, like the FDA, and I don't know what your opinion of the FDA is, but ours is not too high, or the, the food. So how did the Food and Drug Administration get put under the same thing? You eat the food, it gets you sick, so then you take the drug to cure the symptom, right? The food and drug. So we set about to say, how do you turn this into a company? How do you turn it into an industry that isn't based off of the Grateful Dead's formula of trying to breed plants for getting as high as possible, but how do you really take advantage of the cannabis plant, which has 70 different compounds in that plant that all are showing and have promise are indicators of curing or helping people with significant diseases that no current drug company is approaching. There are 7,000 diseases out there trying to be treated with 500 drugs. So with that being said, it all starts off with consistency. If you can't get something that is consistent to your prescription, it becomes dangerous. Some people can smoke pot and fall immediately asleep. Some people will get the munchies. Depending on the CBDs or CBCs, you'll get a diet effect. When I look at television and I look at these drugs that the FDA has approved, and it could cause heart failure, blood clots, headaches, an erection for more than 5 hours. You know what I'm saying? When I look at those kinds of things there, the cannabis one is that you can go to sleep, you can get horny, you'll fall. You know what I'm saying?
You might feel good.
You might feel
Craig,
good.
let me. I'm going to transition to Todd here.
No, I'm going to go right to it. I'm sorry.
No. Let me transition to Todd. Todd's company, again, I'll let him speak to it, but it's all about laboratory standardization and now a trade school for training people in the area of growing and also being what you'd call a bud master, like a Starbucks
Right.
or a pharmacist. So how are you guys approaching the standardization?
Well, there is no standardization, and that's the problem. Just because you, as a grower, would bring your cannabis to a specific lab, that lab will do different tests than the other lab, and there's no standardization. It just doesn't exist. Colorado just passed a law May 1st where you finally have to test edibles and test the oils and test the concentrates because, like Greg said, there's no regulation of the ingredients that's inside. So there has to be, right? So we take the testing to a whole new level because we test for everything, not just the THC and the CBD content. We test for heavy metals. That's just in the water that it's being fed. We test for pesticides and herbicides and microbials and fungus and mold and all the things that we should not be ingesting, which currently, if you're going to any dispensary anywhere in the world, not anyone, but about 98% of the product that's out there is only tested for THC and CBD content. That has to change, and that's what we're going to do. There has to be a regulatory body of some sort that says that we have X amount of this is allowed, X amount of that is allowed. And like Craig said earlier, even our lettuce has 51 acceptable pesticides on it. Right? 51 pesticides on a head of lettuce, and that's acceptable by the FDA. And that's why he mentioned earlier, do we really trust the FDA in order to regulate this stuff? And as far as training is concerned, there is no training. How do you get a job in a dispensary? You show up and you know the guy, or there's no specific training for how to do that, how to grow.
So this is leading to you being able to walk into a dispensary and say, okay, I need something to help me go to sleep. I need pain management, and I don't want to be hungry.
That's right.
And they say, okay, you're going to want this strain over here. Here's the THC level, the cannabinoids. So just Doug, I'm going to cut to you because I think I just want to talk about the legality, just so we get that in up front. I know the conspiracy theory is that I think William Randolph Hearst owned the newspapers and the timber industry. He wanted newspapers made out of pulp, so he got them to make hemp illegal and use the whole getting high, reefer madness as sort of the backdrop for why this was a good thing to do. Where are we at from a legal standpoint?
Well, the general rule is that marijuana is a Schedule I substance. It's illegal federally to distribute, to possess, to manufacture, and then to facilitate in any of those activities. What has happened is today we have 32, and if we could bring up slide 25, we have 32 states that have taken it upon themselves to legislate either the complete recreational use, which is Colorado and Washington, of marijuana, or to use medical marijuana, which is the balance of the 30 states. So you have this interplay between what's illegal federally and what is now allowed on a statewide basis. To Todd's point, what's really interesting is that on a statewide basis, some of the states have really said, okay, we're going to push this down locally, and we're going to let you cities and counties decide how you want to treat it. And if you look at, I'm not going to name a city, some of these cities don't really have the expertise to decide how many plants someone should be allowed to grow. What are the land use decisions and implications for where a dispensary or collective or cooperative should be? So we've taken this general federal rule and we've armed our local folks with the responsibility to regulate, which poses a really unique and difficult challenge because it has to be financed, at least now, privately. And responsible industry is taking that responsibility, but you have that overlay between the public and the private regulation.
Yeah. So let me tip over to Sue here and tell you a little bit about her organization. I think some of the ways that she believes that this industry could do a better job than the tobacco industry or the alcohol industry, maybe targeting kids and things like that. I think we're all here talking about being responsible, but at the same time, I've had some people come up to me. I'm a father of 2 daughters, 12 and 8 years old, and say, well, would you want your daughter smoking marijuana? I said, well, I'd probably prefer that over them taking Paxil and Xanax and Zoloft and being, depressed in some way that they don't need to be. So I think from a family standpoint, your organization, how are you guys dealing with this situation?
Thank you, Zappy. I would like to ask, it's hard to see because we have all these lights, but how many of you have come to learn how to get into this industry? Can I see a show of hands? I'm assuming, okay, good. For those of you who are coming to see how to get into the industry, I may not be the most popular panelist here today because I'm here to represent the voice of public health, especially that of children. And I'm here to raise awareness about what is already happening. I'm here to help us avoid the mistakes. I think we have an opportunity to avoid the mistakes of the tobacco and alcohol industries. My organization has begun a marijuana studies program for state legislators and state executive branch people. We have a history of doing this. We're not just representing families, but we represent science. And we have developed an addiction studies program since 1999 with Wake Forest University School of Medicine. We believe in science. And I'm really distressed to hear some implications from the panelists so far about just throwing science out, like the baby out with the bathwater, and throwing the FDA out with the bathwater. I don't think we want to do that. So I also think that there is a genuine opportunity with this new emerging industry if, in fact, more states legalize and if, in fact, the feds eventually legalize marijuana. There's an opportunity for this new industry to partner with the public health community. If you don't, the public health community is going to come after you, as they have with the alcohol and tobacco companies. And there are good reasons why we need to think about public health, particularly for kids. I'm going to go through a few things, and then I'll come back to some points later on. First of all, we know from the science that the brain develops through adolescence and matures not until age 22, 23 for young women, 24, 25 for young men. Guess who figured that out before the neuroscientists did? Anyone to take a guess?
Mom and Dad.
Mom and Dad is a good answer. But from a business point of view, it was the rental car companies. They saw the data. The accidents go boom at age 25. You can't rent a car before you're age 25. They didn't know why. The neuroscientists found that out later on. So this vulnerable brain of adolescents and young adults is very vulnerable to every addictive drug, including marijuana. There is a landmark study that came out about 6 months ago that looked at kids age 13, all the children who were born during a single year in Dunedin, New Zealand. And they let the kids grow to age 13, gave them a battery of IQ tests and cognitive tests, and then interviewed all those people. There were more than 1,000 born that year in that city. They looked at their, they looked at their marijuana use by age 13 and started using marijuana, and they were eliminated from the sample. But the rest began using marijuana later on. Some did, some didn't, most did. And then at age 38, they gave the same battery of tests to these people. So they solved a problem of knowing what the IQ was before marijuana use started. At age 38, those who started before age 18 and continued use had an 8-point drop in IQ. That's enough to put an average person in the bottom third of the IQ scale. Those of you who are interested in a workforce, those of you who are interested in all of the problems we have educating kids in our country today, need to pay attention to that information. Many other studies show that the sooner kids start using, the more trouble they get into. 1 in 6 become addicted to marijuana if they start before age 18. There are good studies and a vast majority of research showing the onset of schizophrenia and other mental illnesses if kids start early. And then we have to worry about drugged driving. We already have a problem with alcohol and driving, and kids who are just learning how to drive, generally at 15 and 16, and then out there on the roads. If they also are using marijuana, we're in big trouble, and they're in worse trouble. So I want to just say, if we could have slide 11, there is an inverse relationship between kids' perception of harm of any addictive drug and their use of it. And this is most pronounced with marijuana. So in 1992, marijuana use was at its lowest among kids. And 92 was the year that a great deal of investment money began coming into legalization organizations who proposed legalization and advocated for it. And since that time, marijuana use has doubled because the message to kids is, gee, Mom, it won't hurt me, it's a medicine. And that's not good. We don't need double use. And now that we have 2 states that have legalized recreationally, unless we are very careful about how we do that, we're going to see use continue to increase and triple. Some estimates from the treatment folks are that it will triple, especially among kids. And we're in big trouble with that.
So that's
all I'll say now.
Okay. So, again, I'm going to, obviously there's all kinds of, point counterpoints about, is texting and driving exponentially more dangerous than, the kids, driving buzzed or whatever the case. But I want to just throw, because we haven't heard from Michael Kraft, and I always consider Canada to be one of the places where these things are they do the ready, aim, fire instead of what we do, which is just jump in and figure it out later. So what's Canada's stand? How is Canada dealing with with this issue?
Well, in Canada, we have obviously the size of the country provides some great opportunity to regulate, and we have a different situation with 35 million people where the equivalent of our FDA has regulated the use of medical marijuana and has transitioned recently a program called the MMAR into the MMPR, and is always concerned about some of the things that have been mentioned here today, like standardization, use, access, studies, R&D, and various other requirements that are important to certainly regulate and ensure that patients have access. Obviously, we don't have a recreational market yet at this point, although there's a lot of discussion and interaction amongst the different governments that have different point of views towards the recreational market. But it's obviously much easier to regulate a market of 35 million people where you have a much more uniform healthcare system and socialized medicine than it is to do the same in the United States. The use of marijuana probably from a recreational and medicinal point of view doesn't vary, I'm sure, between the countries because there's so many similarities from a cultural and just general lifestyle use. But it's a great environment because it is regulated and it provides an opportunity, very clear definition for both patients who want to access the product, in addition to the investment community who's interested in investing in Canada. It's investable because there is clear guidelines and platform. And the market will evolve, but certainly the eyes are on America, and we're looking to see what happens here. And I think the country will take direction from the U.S., but we're trying to lead in this instance and have a policy that serves the constituents.
Cool. Well, this panel is called the highs and lows of the cannabis economy. I didn't come up with that one. Somebody else came up with that pun. But the interesting thing, I think, just to touch on that, each of us, is, to me, the highs are that there's an incredible opportunity, the biggest industry happening right now without any big brands. The lows are you don't really know who's who and who to trust and who's doing what. And so I'm going to show a couple slides, but Craig, Todd, and myself at one point were part of a company that was called GrowLife, and this company was originally Phototron. They had a single unit for growing plants, and we diversified that company into a diversified marijuana company with a lighting company and nutrients and online elements to that company. We left there. Current management has, speaking of the lows, has gotten in some trouble. They're one of the stocks that has been frozen trading. There have been a few of those already. So again, such a new industry, you don't always know who the business person is or who the regulators are going to pinpoint for to be pointed out. And so that's an element. I just want to point to slide 15 and 16 because 15 and 16 show the prices of the publicly traded marijuana companies between December of last year and now. So just a few months later, these stocks have gone. So you can see, Medbox, MDBX, it was $10, then $22 now. CANN, $1.81 up to $18. Let's go to slide 16 is another one. You can see publicly traded TerraTech, TRTC, was at a penny. It's now at 68 cents. So to get a 68-time return or a 20-time return, this is an incredible opportunity. But I think, again, we should talk about what do you avoid? What should you be looking for as a telltale thing to avoid so you don't wind up being at 68 cents and selling it at 3 cents?
You definitely want to look for companies who report because 90% of the public cannabis companies do zero reporting. Very few of them have real products, and a lot of them just partner together to do joint press releases, to do joint ventures, but a lot of them aren't doing anything. So definitely do your research on what the company is actually doing, who it is behind the company, and do they fill out the right forms and cross their T's and dot their I's for sure.
And Craig, I know you've got a first of its kind banking relationship in Nevada that maybe you want to describe, because I think people right now sitting in this room assume that banks can't do any business with marijuana companies, that it's a cash business. And I know Eric Holder, the Attorney General, has been making some moves there, but you actually have a banking relationship.
Well, I'd like to talk about that, but I'd like to respond to a few of the things that have been said here on the panel, because everybody that is on this panel and every point of view on this panel is required to make institutional ready companies for the public market, okay? When I see the GrowLife stocks and the stocks on the board there don't really respond to the fundamentals of investing, that was exactly the same way it was in the dot-com business. When I bought my first share of Microsoft, I had no idea, or Amazon, I had no idea that in the category there would be giant winners within the category. So in some investment decisions, you bet the company, and in some investment decisions, you bet the jockey. what this lady has brought up is a very real thing, that young children's minds are in development. It is not good for any drugs. And if the industry is going to exist without lots of regulations forced upon us, the conversation from saving $17 billion in the court systems and the prison systems have to change to the kinds of conversations that she's having about taking the drugs out of the hands of developing minds. But we don't have enough time here today. I can show you studies on how many kids die from prescription drug overdoses that they get from their mother's, medicine cabinet that will make the numbers of the IQ drop points look minuscule in comparison. Not that it's not real, and not as an industry that we do not have to address all of them. The conversation needs to change. But with that being said, here from our perspective is what happened. First of all, the growing process that currently exists today, as Todd has done, is an old greenhouse-type growing methodology that is not kosher. There's bugs, there's pesticides, there's everything else that get ingested into the system. So what had to be invented was tools that don't exist to make the industry grow. And that is, like in the GrowBlocks unit, stopping these large grows from disease being able to travel. The old Monsanto, where my seed flew into your yard, and now it's not, you now have to pay royalty on it. Waterborne germs, and every plant that grows has to have the right amount of photosynthesis, which is lighting, and the right amounts and different amounts of nutrition at certain times in the plant growth. So until you can grow a consistent plant with consistent genetics so that it's the same. A bad example is a McDonald's hamburger. It's the same in Los Angeles as it's the same as in Hong Kong. So for it really to be accepted by the community, for the myriad of diseases that...
Do you want to put that slide up for a sec? Slide number...
Well, I have detailed scientific studies,
46.
but 46 will allow me to do it without hogging too much time. So it starts with the consistency of growing and the ability to recreate the same genetic disposition in plant after plant after plant that does not exist in the marketplace today. It then turns over into the digipath, where these plants are studied and where the plants are, the ingredients in the plant by batch are logged so that the patient can know exactly what it is that they're consuming. And the research that we have as well and that are pursuing is what are the effects. For instance, when you look over there, the cannabis plant is always known for something, for foreigners and wild people to get high with. But in fact, what they're doing is in a lot of these plants, you'll see that the CBCs, CBNs, CBGs, CBAs, CBDs, these are only 7 of our top priority ingredients within the plant that we are breeding our DNA toward building these, because these are the efficacious medical aspects of the plant that will change the skincare industry, the nutraceutical industry, and eventually the pharmaceutical industry forever. So when you're thinking about cannabis, it's not all, this panel is not all about the stoner. It is all about the ingredients. There are 70 ingredients in this plant. These are the ones that we have the first indications on and the first scientific data. I agree with you. We are people of science, and that science is what is necessary. And
so we have scientific data that indicates, I love your use of that word, indicates that some of these constituents of marijuana may be useful medicines. But why not let the process go through the FDA process to test for safety, and then safety of use in humans and efficacy, and let them become drugs? There's actually a pharmaceutical company in Britain that's doing that. called GW Pharmaceuticals, and they're about to get FDA approval of a drug called Sativex. It just went on the fast track for advanced cancer pain. I'm all for that. What bothers me is to see products out there in Colorado and all the other medical marijuana states, the 20 states, that are selling products that they say, or strains that the bud tender says, this is good for your sleep, this will help you do this will cure this or that or the other thing, with no scientific evidence of safety or efficacy. That's where the industry has to go.
That her point is exactly the business model of this panel.
Yes.
Right.
And that's good.
The testing,
I'm all
the
for that.
legal,
Yes.
the genetics and the growing
And
the
FDA
testing.
approval.
Yeah.
Well, FDA approval, we can,
Hold on.
We can argue FDA for hours.
Hold on.
FDA approval is synthetics.
That's right.
We're all hooked on synthetics. An FDA does not grow an herbal plant. They take the ingredient, the CBD, the CBC, the CBA, they make it into a synthetic.
Nope. That's not what GW is doing. They grow research-grade marijuana and extract cannabidiol from it and purify it and turn it into a pharmaceutical product. It is not a synthetic.
But their growing process is an archaic growing process that does not guarantee genetic.
No, they're doing
Integrity.
We won't solve this for them. So let me just switch to
At the
Doug
end of
and
the
just
day, it's
ask-
having clinical-like research, and the industry has to evolve, and it has to get to the point where
Where
big
it's
money
willing
comes
to do
in
that.
and meets the standards that have been in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's what it's going to take.
But let's not
today's
sell it as
platform-
medicine beforehand when it hasn't gone through those.
But we can
safety
we can
measures.
also look at the market for natural medicines, and you go in and you see these natural food stores, natural healthcare
Dietary
stores.
supplements.
And they have not also, there's so many users, people that are looking for alternative treatments that are using those products that haven't gone through the same rigorous type of standards that pharmaceutical products have, and they still have value. So the question is, what's the term? How long is it going to take? When is the money going to come into the system to promote clinical-like research?
Well,
that's the reality.
Let me
It's
just
already
get
happened. It's already
I
happened.
just want to throw Doug. I know you're.
Well, I just wanted to shift. I know you wanted to talk about Craig's state chartered bank and moving it more to the business side. The federal government has actually kind of embraced the investment aspect of this. And a few things happened. If you could pull up slide 27, please. So Eric Holder recognized that this is really now a cash business, and somebody has to do something with this cash. And the federal government has to create regulations that will move it from a cash business to a regulated business. Deputy Attorney General James Cole came out and said, look, there are 8 policies, which are on slide 22. I won't go through them all, but there are 8 policies that we as the federal government are concerned about. One is, look, if marijuana is not legal in one state, we don't want you bringing the marijuana from the legalized state to the not legal state. Then, so slide 22. Slide 22, please.
22.
So these are the 8 federal priorities. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network said, look, we're going to take those 8 priorities, and you banks, feel comfortable if you want, but if you follow these 8 priorities, you can start creating a banking system for the marijuana industry. You can take this cash and you can now accept deposits and you can put it in your banking system. There are a lot of tweaks and a lot of questions, and up until a few weeks ago, I hadn't heard of any banks. I mean, certainly Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they're not really accepting these deposits. But looking at the state chartered bank model, because it's not FDIC insured, state chartered banks could become a place where these deposits can come, and they may feel more comfortable about doing all the paperwork involved with accepting the deposits.
Interesting. One of the things that I'm getting from this panel is that there's a lot of things that don't exist today that the industry itself is having to develop on its own. And one, I'll make an analogy that, I've always seen some of the best technology solutions come out of the porn business because they drive the use and make it a better experience. On the same thing here, some of the drug delivery systems for cannabis are pretty incredible. I've got a bunch here, courtesy of Vapor Corp, which is a publicly traded company, but I don't own any stock in. But the technology to be able to use the product has evolved rapidly. And as it turns out, the federal government is actually saying that these vaporizers are probably going to be the premier drug delivery system, because instead of taking your penicillin as a pill, it goes into your stomach, and 15, 20 minutes later it's in your bloodstream. With this vaporizer, you push the button, pull in, and you've got your, whatever it is, penicillin. And so this is really creating incredible medical technology that's coming out of this. And I think that that's one of the major opportunities here, is from a medical standpoint.
I think it's important that we differentiate the idea of what is cannabis 1.0 versus what we are talking about here on the panel today. The product that is grown in Colorado, finally, the problem is that it is pushed down to the states, and the states then push it down to the local city council. Have you ever been before a local city council? There are 5 people that sit in front of you that you would not employ. They're people that have, and these are the people that are responsible for making the decisions and rules for the industry. So education of the people that are setting the standards and rules is the most important thing we can do, because there is no FDA or federal safeguard on this product at this moment to be able to regulate that. It's down to people that are making decisions that we have. So our approach of Cannabis 2.0, Zappy, is that we are growing in sterile environments, in sterile cages, exactly the same procedures that a medical company would grow to. You have to be decontaminated and wear smocks before you go into the grow room. It has to go through rigorous testing, and there is a seed-to-sale software program. I mean, the regulations that we are putting on ourselves now, so that none of it is diverted, that none of it goes to children, that none of it has a bad batch that goes to it, where it's transported, how it's transported. And talking about the bank that's there, the amount of rules, the amount of paperwork that you have to lock the cash in the box with a third-party certificate to show how much was in there before it gets recounted now at the bank with the proper forms of where it came from so that the bank can cover their ass. This industry is all being formed from within right now. It is entrepreneurs that are writing the software, that are moving to sterile conditions. Test labs today, when you go up to, I don't mean to offend anybody in Colorado, a test lab is a little bit more than you bought your kid for his home chemistry set, right? I mean, a test lab is really something that measures the poisons and the heavy metals, and the responsible players that the capital markets now will support are bringing those kinds of standards before they are forced upon us, or before it becomes necessary to put on us. If the industry doesn't clean up its act, most of the people that we see in business today will be gone. Yep. And the new generation of people who grow under the right conditions, who use the right medical studies. We're involved with a company called Medicus, a large testing company that does analytics on no harm for FDA trial products. I'm not saying that science shouldn't be the testing. We spend a lot of money on testing to get to these things. But now that we have the results, can we ensure that that's the product that's being delivered to the market?
Yeah. Well, Todd, I know you, DigiPath has these trade schools that are going to be training people to grow it and to be bud masters. What's happening on that, training side of things?
Well, there's a demand for it, because all of these dispensaries and grows are popping up everywhere, and you ask any grower that you meet, and he's the best. Right? He'll tell you, I'm sure. He has the secret sauce. He does this differently, and
he does a voodoo dance.
Right. He dances around. He puts a fan over here. So, again, back to standardization of growing, standardization of dispensing. It just doesn't exist. So there's a need to teach that. If you go in Vegas, you want to get a job dealing cards. You have to go to school to learn how to deal cards, because there are certain things that you have to do. It's not like that in this industry, and it needs to be. So
Yeah.
creating a curriculum where people can either go to a seminar like this or go to a real classroom, brick and mortar, or online, we're going to do all three.
Same as a pharmacist. If, you know, you don't want a guy, a Rastafarian gentleman with dreadlocks making the recommendation of what your thing. These people
No
need
offense
to
to
be.
Rastafarians, but
No, but I mean, they need to be trained on what
That's right.
the cause and effect of the medicine that we're growing is. And
right.
Well, let me just ask you, Doug. I mean, you know, like, you know, we were talking earlier about the alcohol industry and the tobacco industry. Like, what is their responsibility for, say, the 5 or 10% of people who can't handle the alcohol or are addicted? What about this industry? What's the responsibility for the industry for people that maybe can't handle it or have some problems?
Well, as you said, we're at the end of the beginning, and I think that responsible folks in this industry can take the lessons from alcohol, from gambling, from all of these vices that we've all lived with for hundreds of years and say, okay, here are some of the problems, drinking and driving. Let's educate. Let's put money into education. Let's put money into prevention. Let's put money into rehabilitation on the forefront before we put these regulations or concurrently with putting in these regulations in place. I know in Colorado, they are charging in excess of 20% on sales tax for their marijuana. The first $40 million of that sales tax goes to school construction. So Colorado has at least taken the first step in recognizing, look, we have the opportunity to take something and make it even better. We can take the revenue generated from this sale and put it into our infrastructure, rather than just putting it into the city's slush fund, the general fund.
Let me just say that building schools is a good and wonderful thing. But that's not providing any money for education. It's not providing any money for treatment. It's not providing any money for prevention.
Understood.
And so that was an initiative that the proponents wrote, and nobody was thinking about consequences. So how can the industry help us, the public health community? How can you guys help us guarantee that some of those taxes will go to these kinds of things, and maybe even contribute some yourselves to these things? Because what happens is, if you don't, then the public health community will come after you, as they did the tobacco industry, which now puts $206 billion in payments to the states to reimburse the states for what the states have to pay to treat the victims of its disease through its Medicaid. So we don't need to even have that happen if we put money into prevention and education in advance.
Our charter, by the way, for those that are applying for licenses, privileged licenses in the states, as part of the charter is 5% of all the retail sales of the product are going directly to the education and the helping of the people that are there. That is being put on. We are a public company, and we do that because we understand we have a responsibility to those poor individuals who fall through the cracks, who can't handle the consequences of our corporate activity.
Right.
I'd like to, if I could, just talk a little bit about corporate responsibility and see, could we have slide 7 and then slide 8, please? One way that the alcohol and tobacco industries, despite the tobacco industry's agreement in the tobacco settlement of 1998 not to market to kids, one way they do it is through flavored products. These on the upper left-hand corner are flavored cigars that are aimed at underage kids. The lower right-hand corner is an alcohol-infused caffeine drink aimed again in multiple flavors for kids. Now, is the marijuana industry doing that? Let's go to slide 8, please. This is a product coming out of Colorado, Dixie Elixir's soft drinks, in flavors that kids like. How can we stop this kind of marketing? And what can you guys do to stop it? I want slide 9 and slide 10, and then I'll stop. So here are some more examples, and I have laid out cards on the shelf in the back to talk to you about how the industry is marketing to kids. Who needs gummy bears?
I do. No, I do love gummy bears. But
I like gummy bears.
I want to just
These
address
are all marijuana-infused foods
I just
that are
want
aimed at
to
kids.
address this because, to me, every time my parents told me not to do something, I wound up doing it immediately. So I think if we could, as a society, learn that very obvious lesson and make this, talk about cannabis as a medicine as opposed to a drug, which is a man-made synthesized thing, if we could have conversations where, like in Europe with wine, where we don't make a big deal out of it. We say, this is medicine. Some people use it for different ailments and things like that. Here's the benefits, the dangers. These kids wouldn't be dying to try it as soon as they could. And I think that's the lesson that we have.
Respect is lost for medicines when they're small children because they are given their Fred Flintstone vitamin to take. And everybody believes that taking a pill is a cure for a problem rather than masking a symptom. It's across all industries.
Doug, let me just go to Michael because we...
Sure. So what I say to the panelists, the genie's out of the bottle. What's going to happen in America? You've got your recreational markets, you've got your medicinal markets. What is this panel? How are they going to regulate? How are the states going to take accountability? How is it going to transform? I mean, in Canada, obviously, as I said earlier, we've got a very regulated market with Health Canada that will evolve. That's medicinal only, so we don't have the challenges that you're referring to that exist because of the recreational market. So what are your thoughts, Doug? I mean, what's the path forward?
My thought is we have to embrace it. We can't treat this as a shadow industry. We have to come right out and say, look, this is something we can't avoid anymore. Let's appoint a drug czar. Let's put money in our local budgets and our state budgets to figure out how to regulate it. Let's get responsible industry into the field. And let's start dealing with brand names rather than what was a few years ago just these mom and pops who were trying to, quote unquote, sell drugs. Let's take this to the next level and make it responsible.
I think, Zappy, you were right when you said it's got to be treated like a medicine and not like a drug. The Klondikes and the little, the gummy bears and stuff, that's all recreational users that are trying to catch a buzz without smoking it, okay? There is not a patient around who goes to the store and buys gummy bears infused with cannabis in order to treat their disease.
But those are all being sold in medical marijuana shops.
They are being sold there because that's the only place they can be sold.
We agree that Cannabis 1.0 was an industry started by pirates and people who were willing to break the law. But I'd like to say that and everybody in the room, in other rooms, I would ask to raise your hand if you smoke. Please don't do that here. Since the civil rights movement and since the war in Vietnam, which I'm extremely familiar with, there hasn't been in America a mass protest or a mass movement of any significance, even Wall Street. Yet every day, 17 billion in prisons and in court systems, and people are smoking it. The majority of people want what the plant has to offer, and they're willing to civilly protest by breaking the law every day. So there has never been a larger study group that says, I don't need any of the scientific facts because I know the people in this room will make their own decisions on how many people are addicted because they've smoked a joint or two. How many people have suffered bad quality? Nobody has overdosed from marijuana. You don't hear the deaths from this every day. The study group is the public, the need and the desire for nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals to cure diseases. Pot is not really about curing diseases, or cannabis is not about curing diseases. It's really about a quality of life that it can provide people that have pain and inflammation and want to feel a little happy like alcohol.
Yeah, so I'm watching the clock tick down. Obviously, we could debate this all day, and the opportunities are endless. I would urge everybody to use the language of medicine, and hopefully by this time next year when we have the panel, that we're talking about some significant breakthrough cures for major diseases, which I believe will happen in the next 12 months. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
10 seconds left.